The mansion glowed like a palace carved from light, its towering glass windows reflecting the golden shimmer of chandeliers that hung like constellations from the ceiling. Crystal prisms scattered soft rainbows across polished marble floors, where every step echoed with wealth and power. A live orchestra played near the grand staircase, their music weaving through the air like silk. Champagne flowed endlessly from silver trays, and the scent of expensive perfume blended with fresh, white roses arranged in towering vases around the ballroom. The guest list read like the cover of a global business magazine. CEOs exchanged strategic smiles. Influencers posed effortlessly for discreet photographers. Politicians laughed a little too loudly at carefully crafted jokes. Diamonds flashed on wrists and necklines, and tailored tuxedos framed confident postures. Every conversation carried the undertone of status, investment, and influence. At the center of it all stood the millionaire host, basking in the admiration he had worked years to command. His tailored suit hugged his frame perfectly, his watch catching the chandelier light with every calculated gesture. He shook hands firmly, accepted praise with modest nods, and made sure every introduction reminded guests of his recent financial triumphs. Tonight was not just a celebration, it was a statement of dominance. Then the ballroom shifted. She appeared at the top of the staircase. His pregnant wife descended slowly, one graceful step at a time, her flowing designer gown cascading around her like liquid ivory. The fabric moved softly with her, delicate yet powerful, accentuating the gentle curve of motherhood she carried with quiet pride. Her skin glowed beneath the lights, her posture regal, her expression serene. She did not demand attention. She simply commanded it. Whispers followed her like a breeze. Guests admired her elegance, her calm strength, her dignified presence beside such wealth. Some called her radiant. Others said she looked like royalty. But across the room, another pair of eyes watched. Sharp, calculating, unsettled. The mistress stood near the bar, her smile thin, her fingers tightening around her glass as she observed the applause, the admiration, the attention that was not hers. And as the wife reached her husband's side, the air grew heavier, not with celebration, but with something darker waiting to unfold. There was a time when the glitter of chandeliers did not exist in their lives, when the only light they had came from a flickering desk lamp in a cramped apartment. Before the mansion, before the tailored suits and exclusive guest lists, there had been unpaid bills stacked on a chipped kitchen counter and sleepless nights filled with anxious planning. She remembered those days clearly. She had believed in him when no one else did. He used to come home exhausted, doubt written across his face, hands trembling from uncertainty. She would sit beside him, spreading out his scattered business plans, helping him refine ideas, encouraging him when investors turned him away. When the banks refused his loan applications, she had smiled softly and told him they would find another way. And they did. The first investment that changed everything had not come from a wealthy partner or a generous sponsor. It had come from her. Quietly, without complaint, she had opened her velvet jewelry box, heirlooms from her mother, gifts from their early anniversaries, and sold them. Gold bangles, diamond studs, a delicate necklace she once treasured. She told him it was temporary. She told him it was worth it. She chose his dream over her possessions without hesitation. And for a while, he had thanked her. For a while, he had promised he would never forget. But success changes the temperature of love. It cools what once burned warmly. Now, in crowded rooms filled with powerful people, he barely introduced her. His hand that once reached for hers now remained in his pocket. His compliments had become rare, replaced by distracted nods and impatient sighs. In public, she felt like a background figure in the empire she helped build. Then came the other woman. The mistress was everything loud and dazzling, sharp red lips, confident laughter, dresses designed to capture attention. She moved with calculated boldness, her touch lingering too long on his arm, her whispers too intimate for public settings. She knew exactly how to position herself beside him, how to flatter his ego, how to make him feel admired in ways that stroked his pride. And he did not stop her. He entertained her closeness openly, smiling at her jokes, leaning in when she spoke, allowing the room to speculate. The wife noticed every glance, every subtle betrayal. She felt the sting of humiliation settle deep in her chest, but her hand instinctively rested over her growing belly. For the baby, she reminded herself.
Stay calm.
Stay dignified. Inside, however, her heart questioned everything. Was loyalty invisible once money arrived? Was sacrifice so easily forgotten? The orchestra softened as a staff member tapped the microphone. Glasses clinked gently. The announcement for the gala toast echoed across the ballroom, and with it, the fragile tension tightened like a drawn wire ready to snap. The applause for the opening toast had barely faded when the mistress began to move. She crossed the ballroom with slow, deliberate confidence, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. A polished smile curved across her lips, sweet enough to fool strangers, but sharp enough to wound. Conversations softened as she approached the pregnant wife, who stood beside her husband, with quiet composure. "Oh my goodness," the mistress cooed, her voice dripping with artificial admiration. "Your gown is absolutely stunning. It's so bold." The wife offered a small, polite smile. Up close, the mistress's perfume was overpowering, her gaze calculating rather than kind. Several guests nearby leaned subtly closer, sensing something performative in her tone. The mistress circled slightly, fingertips grazing the delicate fabric as if examining it. "It must have taken courage to wear something so fitted," she added, eyes flicking briefly to the gentle curve of the wife's belly. Before anyone could process the shift in her expression, a metallic glint flashed beneath the chandelier light. In one swift, shocking motion, she produced a small pair of silver scissors from her clutch and cut. The sound was unmistakable, a harsh, tearing slice that ripped through silk and silence at the same time. The blade traveled down the side seam of the flowing gown, splitting the elegant fabric apart. The soft ivory material gave way, falling open in a devastating cascade. Gasps erupted across the ballroom like shattered glass. The wife froze completely, her breath caught in her throat as cool air brushed against exposed skin. The torn fabric hung unevenly from her body, dignity unraveling with every second that passed. For a moment, she couldn't move.
Couldn't speak.
The humiliation struck so suddenly it paralyzed her. Whispers exploded in every direction. Did she just? "Oh my God. This is insane." A few nervous laughs slipped from shocked mouths, unsure whether to treat it as scandal or spectacle. The millionaire stood inches away. He did nothing. Worse, a low, amused chuckle escaped him. He shook his head, as if inconvenienced rather than outraged. "Maybe," he said loudly enough for those closest to hear, "this is why I told you not to wear something so dramatic. It's embarrassing." Embarrassing. The word echoed louder than the tearing fabric. The wife's trembling hands rushed to gather the shredded material, clutching it desperately against her body. Her fingers shook as she tried to hold together what had just been destroyed. Heat burned behind her eyes, tears threatening to fall, but she swallowed them back with every ounce of strength she had left. She would not cry here. Not in front of them. Not in front of him. The mistress stepped back, satisfied, her lips curling in quiet triumph. Around them, the orchestra had stopped completely. No glasses clinked now. No laughter lingered. Only silence.
Heavy.
Suffocating. Absolute. For a long, suspended moment, she stood in the center of the ballroom, clutching the torn edges of her gown, as if holding together the last pieces of her pride. The silence pressed against her ears, broken only by faint whispers and the distant clink of a glass being set down somewhere in the crowd. Her hands trembled, but her face remained composed, almost eerily calm. She did not scream.
She did not argue.
She did not beg for an apology. Instead, she slowly stepped away from the circle of watching eyes. Each step was careful, measured, dignified despite the fabric slipping beneath her fingers. She moved toward the edge of the hall where the lighting softened, where she could breathe without feeling the weight of 100 stares dissecting her humiliation. With unsteady fingers, she reached into her clutch and pulled out her phone. The movement caught attention immediately. A few guests exchanged amused glances. She unlocked the screen and dialed a number she had not called in months, not because it wasn't available, but because she had always chosen independence. The phone rang only once. When he answered, her voice was soft, but it did not break. "Dad, I think I need you." A nearby guest let out a short, mocking laugh. "What is this, high school?" someone muttered. "Calling for backup?" The millionaire smirked, folding his arms across his chest as if entertained by the spectacle. "Let her," he said casually. "Maybe he can buy her a new dress." The mistress rolled her eyes dramatically, sipping from her glass as though the moment bored her. But outside, something shifted. Low, powerful engines began to roar beyond the mansion gates. The sound grew louder, not chaotic, but synchronized. Deliberate. At the entrance, security guards who had been relaxed minutes ago suddenly straightened, their postures rigid. Earpieces buzzed. Eyes widened. Inside, the mocking laughter faded. The air changed, and tension quietly replaced arrogance. The roar of engines grew louder until headlights flooded the mansion's grand driveway in sharp, white beams. One by one, a convoy of sleek black luxury vehicles rolled past the iron gates, moving with controlled authority. Valets froze mid-step. Guests near the entrance turned instinctively toward the doors. The cars stopped in perfect alignment, engines cutting off in synchronized precision that felt almost rehearsed. Doors opened at the same time. Men in tailored suits stepped out first, scanning the surroundings with disciplined focus. Then, from the center vehicle, he emerged. Her father. He did not rush. He did not look angry. He simply stepped onto the driveway with calm, measured authority, adjusting the cuff of his suit as if arriving at an ordinary board meeting. His presence carried weight, the kind built not from noise, but from decades of power. He was known across continents, a global billionaire investor whose acquisitions reshaped industries and whose signature could alter markets overnight. Financial magazines analyzed his strategies. Governments respected his influence. Competitors feared his silence. He had never interfered in his daughter's marriage. When she chose love over wealth, he had accepted it without protest. When she insisted she wanted a man who built his own empire, not inherited one, he had smiled quietly and stepped back. He believed she deserved the freedom to choose her own happiness. But stepping back had never meant stepping away. He had watched from a distance, observed, waited. The mansion doors opened before he even reached them. Staff members stood straighter than ever before. The music had not resumed. The ballroom remained suspended in uneasy stillness. His polished shoes echoed against the marble as he entered, his security team remaining discreet but present behind him. Recognition spread like wildfire. "That's him. It can't be. Why is he here?" Whispers turned into stunned silence as guests realized exactly who had walked into the gala. Conversations died mid-sentence. Glasses were lowered slowly. Phones subtly angled for confirmation. Across the room, the millionaire felt the blood drain from his face. His confident posture faltered, shoulders tightening as reality settled in. The mistress, who moments earlier had stood smug and unbothered, took an unconscious step backward, her fingers tightening around her clutch. The father's gaze did not wander. It found his daughter immediately. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, still clutching the torn remains of her gown around her body. Her composure held, but her eyes betrayed the hurt she had swallowed in front of everyone. Without a word, he removed his tailored coat. He walked to her slowly, each step heavy with restrained emotion, and gently draped it over her shoulders. The fabric enveloped her like armor. His hands lingered briefly, steady and protective. His eyes lowered to the shredded silk beneath. He saw the torn seam. He saw the trembling fingers. He saw the tears she had refused to let fall. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm, terrifyingly calm.
Who did this?
The question was soft. but it echoed louder than any shout, and the entire ballroom held its breath. The silence stretched thin, fragile as glass, until the father gave a subtle nod. From behind him, two members of his legal team stepped forward, briefcases in hand, their expressions professional and composed. There was no drama in their movements, only certainty. The father adjusted his cufflinks before speaking, his tone measured, almost conversational. "I believe introductions are unnecessary," he began, his gaze sweeping briefly across the frozen faces in the ballroom. "However, since tonight seems to be about public displays, let us continue." A faint ripple of unease passed through the crowd. He turned his attention to the millionaire. "As of 3 weeks ago, through a series of strategic acquisitions and negotiated transfers, I obtained majority shares in your company." The words landed softly, but detonated. Murmurs erupted instantly. "That's impossible." "When?"
How?
The father continued without raising his voice. "Your corporation has been under significant financial strain for the past 2 quarters. Declining liquidity, over-leveraged expansions, poor risk management." He paused, letting the humiliation settle properly. It was collapsing. Quietly. The millionaire's mouth opened, but no words came out. "I chose to intervene," the father added. "Not for profit. For protection." A member of the legal team opened a folder and handed over documents. "Effective immediately," the father said calmly. "You are removed from your position as CEO." Gasps spread across the ballroom like wildfire. Some guests instinctively stepped back from the millionaire, as if his fall from power were contagious. Security personnel, no longer his, approached discreetly. One stood beside him, another slightly behind, signaling the irreversible shift. The millionaire's confident posture crumbled. His empire, built over years, dismantled in under a minute. "This is insane," the mistress suddenly snapped, rushing forward. "You can't just—" "Actually," the father interrupted gently, "I can." He nodded once more. A tablet was produced. With a swipe, surveillance footage from inside the ballroom appeared on the large event screen behind them.
Clear.
Undeniable. The mistress's hand pulling scissors from her clutch. The deliberate cut. The tearing fabric. The room watched in stunned silence. Her boldness evaporated instantly. "It was a joke," she stammered weakly. "It was assault," the father corrected. Security turned toward her this time. She protested, but her voice carried no authority now. Within moments, she was escorted out, heels stumbling against the marble that had once amplified her confidence. Around the room, social elites adjusted alliances in real time. Smiles faded.
Distances widened.
No one stood beside the fallen couple. The balance of power had shifted completely. And everyone knew it. When the last echo of the closing doors faded and the ballroom settled into stunned quiet, the father finally turned fully toward his daughter. The power he had displayed moments ago softened into something far more personal. His expression, once unreadable, carried regret. "I should have stepped in sooner," he said quietly, so only those closest could hear. "I thought staying silent was respecting your choice." She looked up at him, her composure cracking now that the storm had passed. The coat around her shoulders felt heavier, not from fabric, but from the protection it symbolized. "I wanted you to have the life you chose," he continued. "You told me you loved him. You said you didn't want my influence shaping your marriage. And I listened." His voice lowered further. But silence should never have meant absence. Her lips trembled. For months, maybe years, she had convinced herself she had to endure everything alone because she had chosen this path. That asking for help would mean admitting failure. "You were never powerless," her father said firmly, lifting her chin gently so she would meet his eyes. "You chose love over wealth. You chose loyalty over convenience. That was never weakness." His gaze hardened slightly. "That was your strength." The tears she had fought so fiercely finally fell. Not dramatic, not loud, just quiet streams of release. The humiliation, the betrayal, the loneliness, all of it poured out at once. She leaned into him, no longer needing to appear unbreakable. "I will protect you," he promised softly. "And my grandchild. No one will ever make you feel small again." Behind them, a broken voice interrupted. "I'm sorry," the millionaire said, stepping forward despite the tension in the room. "I didn't mean, it was a misunderstanding. I was joking. Please." She did not turn around. He moved closer, desperation cracking through his pride. "Please, just look at me." Slowly, she spoke, calm, steady, final. "You laughed." 2 simple words. But they struck harder than any accusation. And for the first time that night, it was his eyes that filled with something he could not control. With his arms steady around her shoulders, her father guided her toward the grand entrance of the mansion. The ballroom parted without being asked, guests stepping aside in quiet respect. No one dared to whisper now. The marble floors that had witnessed her humiliation now carried her measured, dignified steps toward the doors. Outside, flashing lights erupted instantly. Paparazzi, who had been waiting for glamorous arrivals, were now scrambling to capture something far more powerful. Cameras clicked rapidly as she emerged beside her father, his coat wrapped securely around her torn gown. The night air was cool, but her posture remained straight. She did not hide her face. She did not rush. She walked tall, chin lifted, eyes forward. The ripped silk beneath the coat was no longer a symbol of shame. It was evidence of survival. Behind the glass doors, guests remained frozen. Some lowered their gazes in discomfort. Others watched with something unexpected: admiration. A few women, particularly, followed her with quiet respect in their eyes, as if witnessing a moment bigger than scandal, a woman choosing dignity over chaos. Inside the ballroom, the millionaire sank into the nearest chair. The weight of what had just happened crushed whatever pride he had left. Conversations resumed slowly, but not in his favor. Phones buzzed relentlessly. Within minutes, social media began exploding with headlines, clips, speculation. And the story was no longer about a torn dress. It was about a fallen empire. 6 months had passed, but the memory of that night no longer haunted her. She lived quietly now within her father's sprawling estate, a place of calm luxury where every detail was designed to offer comfort rather than display power. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting soft patterns across polished floors and serene gardens. The laughter of staff mingled with the distant hum of birds, and for the first time in years, she felt at peace. The most profound change, however, came in the form of her child. She held her newborn in gentle arms, the tiny heartbeat beneath her hand a rhythm of hope and renewal. Nights were long, and days filled with wonder, but each moment reminded her of her resilience and strength. She smiled more freely now, no longer weighed by public humiliation or betrayal. Determined to transform her pain into purpose, she founded an organization dedicated to supporting women who had been betrayed, humiliated, or marginalized. Through mentorship, financial guidance, and emotional support, she offered the empowerment she had once lacked. Meanwhile, headlines screamed her ex-husband's downfall, bankruptcy filings, lost investors, and public disgrace. The mistress vanished from elite circles, her reputation tarnished beyond repair. And through it all, she rebuilt her life. Stronger, wiser, more independent than ever before. Each day was a reminder that true power was never inherited or bought. It was claimed, nurtured, and protected by those who refused to bow to humiliation. Wealth has a way of inflating egos, of blinding those who possess it to the consequences of their actions. It can create arrogance so thick that empathy and decency seem optional, almost irrelevant. The millionaire had believed that money alone could shield him, that influence could excuse cruelty, that laughter could erase accountability. But wealth, no matter how vast, is fragile when tested against character, loyalty, and integrity. Dignity, on the other hand, is enduring. It is quiet but undeniable. It cannot be bought, borrowed, or faked. In that ballroom, the pregnant wife demonstrated a dignity that outshone opulence, a composure that outlasted mockery. Her strength was not in retaliation, but in choosing to rise above the chaos, to hold herself steady even when every eye was judging, every whisper cutting deeper than knives. Humiliation exposes true character. Those who laugh at others reveal more about themselves than their victims. True power lies not in control over others, but in restraint, in courage, and in protecting those who cannot yet protect themselves. A father's silent strength, measured but resolute, has the power to reverse fortunes, reshape destinies, and rewrite narratives without raising his voice. He laughed when her dress was torn, but the moment her father walked in, it was his empire that unraveled.